So my name is Chef Katie Mae. I've been following a whole food plant-based diet for 10 years, almost 10 years coming January 1st. And I've been teaching this style of eating for 8 years, almost 9 years. And just loving I can't say actually, I love every moment of it, but the food I love so much. The plant-based lifestyle has been the single most important factor I've ever made in my life, the single most important decision I've ever made in my life, because what it's done for my health, but also the vitality I have, just all this energy I have to go do the things I want to do. So, and that's what I care about. I don't care about blood work. I care about living a delicious life, what I call delicious living, because I came from a standard American diet, living in Michigan. I was eating lots of processed food, mostly ice cream. When I was 18, it was 90% of my calories from ice cream, and then I went to college and it became ice cream and fried potatoes. Not much better. Of course, alcohol and caffeine in there too. And so I basically wore myself out. I got so sick, I didn't even realize. I thought it was just a thyroid issue, but now, looking back, I realized I've actually done a lot of damage to my liver. So now I'm doing more things like fasting and really dialing in my nutrition, not just eating whole plants and mostly vegan lifestyle, but eating the most nutritious food. Okay, but I told you that because at 18, I was getting so much dopamine from the ice cream that I knew, going into this, I studied nutrition at Bastyr University. I got my master's in nutrition, and I knew that if I was going to make this sustainable for myself and hope that anyone else would listen to me, it had to be delicious food. So that's what I really focus on, is making it delicious. And so that's why I started with this class here at PlantCity. It's all about the cheesiness and the creamy and richness. I think this is a great introduction to showing you how tasty whole food plant-based diet can be. So I have a few different cheesy recipes here, but we're going to get started with one of the simpler ones. Because how many people have made plant-based cheeses at home? Anyone? Awesome. Have you ever done a fermentation, culturing of the cheeses? That makes a big difference. So I'm going to show you how we do it without the culturing, and then I'll show you how we do it with culturing. Okay, so we have a food processor here and a Vitamix. Now there's so much information. I'm going to try to give you little tidbits here and there. But if you guys want to go deeper, I'm going to tell you about my online cooking class later. And you can just keep coming to more of these plant-based classes here at PlantCity. I'm teaching another one on Sunday. It's going to be a lot of fun too. So we have nuts here, cashews, that are already soaked, 2 cups. I'm just going to pour them in our food processor here. The food processor is used for making thicker dishes, or dishes where you want more chunky consistency. So you don't want it super creamy like you would do a smoothie or a dressing. The food processor allows you to make things that would be thicker, like veggie burgers, or this dressing, this dish is going to be a thick dip. So we're going to, and it might be too hard to blend in the blender, depending on how thin or thick you want it to come out to. So we're going to do a 1/4 cup of water, and we have, I love coming into new places to teach, and I love having a standard kitchen where I have all my stuff all in one place. So it's not confusing. So we're going to do, this has already been soaked. For about 4 hours they've been soaking. A lot of times they say soak cashews for 8 hours. I don't really like that because they start to get like a blue and purpley color and it looks funky. So that's kind of just a turn off for me. So I go about 2 to 4 hours for soaking nuts.
Okay, if you were short on time, let's say you wanted to make it right then,
Yes.
could you use like hot water for 10
Yes, you
minutes
can
or
boil
something
them
like
in
that?
hot water
Okay.
to get it going, and then don't continue to boil them.
Yeah.
Turn off the water and let them go. The longer you let them soak for, the better they're going to be. Right? They're going to absorb the water and get creamier. So we have a big citrus press here. I like these big ones because you can fit larger lemons here. You want to put your lemon, the flat side down, squeeze in here. And this food processor I'm using is a Cuisinart. It's a 14-cup Cuisinart. that is great because you can do large things. And the blade is sharper. If you get just a $30, $40 Cuisinart or any brand food processor, it's not going to give you the power and the sharpness to cut everything the way you want. You'll have to do a number of batches rather than doing it all at once. So I'm cutting fresh lemons and limes here because we have this fantastic kitchen upstairs that has all of these available. But in my own home, I often buy a bottle of lime and lemon juice, so I don't have to squeeze them each time. And I'll do a combination. I like fresh lemon in my juice, in my water in the morning, but they're cooking lots. It's nice to have a pre-squeezed. So we're going to do nutritional yeast. How many people like nutritional yeast? Yes, I do too. So this is a key ingredient when making cheesy things because you have a lot of umami in the nutritional yeast. We're going to do a quarter cup, which is basically all of this. Somebody know what umami is? What was it?
It's a bean.
It's actually it's a taste. So just like we have, just add the rest of that. We have sweetness, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. Umami is the fifth taste. And I actually have a whole webinar about this because it's so fascinating how we can use umami to our advantage. So I'm going to blend this up as it is. And I know the recipe actually says you can put this in a blender, but it's just complicated. I'll show you later on how complicated it can be to make a thick cashew cheese in a blender. So I'm going to do it here. Plug it in. I have lots of different size spatulas. I love using these little one for the Vitamix. You can use a bigger one here for food processor. You want to scrape the sides to make sure it's all getting blended in. So back to that nutritional yeast and umami. Umami is a taste, and it's the savoriness that we get from food. So in cheese and meat, you get a lot of that savoriness that comes from that taste umami. And so when you're doing plant-based cheeses, you want to not just think about getting fattiness or saltiness, which are both in cheese, but that umami flavor. So nutritional yeast is an excellent one for that. But even other ingredients like olives, you wouldn't want to use olives totally blended in here unless you were really going for an olive flavor. But that's what you want to think about when you're making plant-based alternatives to dairy, is how are you going to add in a little bit of umami. Sun-dried tomatoes are another great option. Seaweed, blue algae, there's a lot of things that could add more flavor, more umami. That's even when you're thinking, someone had the bolognese for dinner, that has a lot of umami in it because you want that meaty consistency. So we're going to add a little more water here. We want to keep this a little thinner. And we're going to add our veggies, but I'm going to do it separately. So we'll add our cheese to a little bowl here because, let's go one more time. If you add the veggies in here, what's going to happen if I add all of the veggies just in here and process it?
Over-process the cheesy stuff, the nuts.
Yeah, well, you know, from a nutritional, I'm not too worried about over-processing the nuts. But the veggies might get too processed and the color is going to get all mixed in to the cheese, which isn't a bad thing. So it's just going to be a difference in your presentation. Really. I'm going to pull this little, this is called the Escalade. This is the type of blade we're using for our blender here. This is the most common blade, but there is also a slicing blade and a grating blade. Both are really important. So don't, when you get a food processor, don't put them away in the cupboard and forget about them. A lot of people do that. Well, a lot of people actually buy equipment like this and then it just sits in the box for months. Like an Instant Pot. How many people have had an Instant Did it sit there for a little bit? Yeah. There's such amazing pieces of equipment. If you just put in a little bit of time, you're using it all the time. So we have this cheese, really plain, but I bet it's tasty just as it is. You could use it as a spread on toast in the morning. You could put it over a sandwich bread instead of hummus. A lot more fat, depending on your needs. That may be a good thing or not so much. So we have this esplay needs to go back into the food processor before adding any food. Otherwise, you will be extremely frustrated. And the bell peppers are a lot softer than our carrots. So I'm going to add our carrots first. Just give those a quick process. And then we'll add our veggies. And I'm missing my little piece that goes inside here. I bought one on Amazon and it turns out it doesn't fit. So I'll try it again. Our carrots are somewhat chopped. We're going to add our bell pepper. I'm just going to cut the bell pepper again. So the kind of tricky thing with a food processor is that it does things totally randomly, right? There's no design to how it's chopping things. And so some of the pieces could be chopped to like 1 inch size, which might be a little big, and others can be chopped down to like a centimeter. So that's something where you kind of have to accept that they're all going to be different sizes. And think about when you put things in, just like you just did, time them. Looks pretty good. You want to just be careful. Things like celery are very fibrous, and sometimes you get large pieces. So put oh, look at that. See? Large piece of bell pepper. Depending on the size of everything else, if this is my only large piece, I'm just going to leave it out rather than over-process everything else. How's that? Now, add this into our cheese. This is way more than we need for that amount of cheese.
Yeah, you're gonna need that again.
Food processor, I don't think so. But I know I'll use my blender multiple times. If you actually wouldn't mind anyways,
Yeah, no thing.
this is my assistant, Cindy. You can put all of that in here. And I kind of, okay, so this is very colorful. It's like a little fiesta, garden fiesta in my bowl. But it's gonna have some flavor, good flavor, but it's not gonna wow you. The way we want it to wow us is with herbs and spices. So, anyone know the kind of the very, I don't want to offend anyone, but the easy way to flavor dishes in restaurants? Salt, oil, sugar, and there's a fourth one that we were just kind of talking about. If you know the processed version, MSG. MSG is like, they actually call it the third spice because there's salt, pepper, and MSG a lot of times in restaurants. MSG though, when we were just talking about umami, umami is the healthy, very natural form of that flavor, that taste, and MSG is a very processed form. So think of sugar in fruit, bananas, mangoes, all very healthy. But then you process it into white sugar, and it becomes a problem. That's the same thing with umami. Umami in our mushrooms and tomatoes, even sweet potatoes, spinach, they all have umami. And you process it, and it becomes MSG. Someone did that in the 1900s, early 1900s. That's where it came from. A Japanese scientist made a whole bunch of money off of it, and it's still going today. So this is my basil and parsley. We had parsley in the kitchen instead of mint. So we're just chopping this up. And You could add this into the food processor, but I'm just doing it by hand. Does anyone have a favorite type of cutting board? Wooden, yes. Very keen on large wooden boards. The plastic ones don't work so well. But in kitchens, we tend to like the plastic ones, except for the chef. You notice all the staff in kitchens get the plastic boards, and then the head chef gets a big wooden board. So I'm mincing this, but you could have put this in the food processor too. The only thing with that, if you mixed it in with either the cheese or the veggies, then you have it all turning green. So if you stir it in, just like you stirred in our veggies, you won't have as much of that. And I've been traveling, and I couldn't bring all my knives with me, and I happened to choose the knife that it's not so sharp. So, does anyone, you are all locals, does anyone have a favorite knife place? Just get your knife sharpened, anyone? That is something I recommend because a dull knife is so dangerous in the kitchen. You want to have a sharp knife. So a cutlery store that could give you, sharpen all your knives. And usually it's like $15 to get them all sharpened. It's so worth it rather than doing it yourself because they're going to do a much better job. Okay. So we have, this is a fun dip. Does anyone want to sample? Be the first to sample? We have this one. I think it might be easiest just to everyone take a cracker, and then you could dip if you don't mind no double dipping. Or you can take a spoon too. We have a couple crackers I just chose from the shelves upstairs in the marketplace. These are rice crackers, sesame flavored. I believe there's no oil added. How many people are brand new, like to plant-based eating, never heard about it before PlantCity? Really? Everyone else is already, it's on their radar. How many people have been eating plant-based for some time? Okay, about last year? Awesome. More than a year, just a couple of years? Yeah. So the plant-based world, whole food plant-based world, has so many people doing great things, so many doctors and nutritionists, educators, chefs, and we're probably on the same page for things about 90-95% of the time, but there's some areas where we differ, and one of those would be oil, extracted oil. I have all these knives up here. Extracted oil is like the white sugar of the fat world. Right? It's like this whole food movement is so on point with all whole foods except for oil. Oil is extremely processed, and yet we call it a whole food. Most of America thinks of oil as a healthy food, whole food, and it's very processed and has most of all of the beneficial things from that fat taken out, like olives. There's all these other great things in olives. So I try to use the whole fat and not the extracted ones. So I'm going to pass around. We'll do the crackers first. You guys can choose a cracker. These ones are rosemary. They're made with flax seeds.
So we'll do are we going to come up or just pass?
We'll pass the bowl.
Yeah,
Does that work with you guys? Sure. We're going to give you guys little bowls for the other dishes. Let's get those going.
Send the crackers around first.
Yes, crackers around first.
Yeah, just keep talking a little more about the oils. Like,
Yes.
So cold pressed olives are processed?
Yeah, well, not olives, but olive oil. Cold pressed olive oil is processed.
Processed.
Yes, I don't know the number. Someone might, it's a very high number, hundreds of olives to make just a tablespoon of olive oil. You're losing a lot of the nutrition from the whole fat. Imagine if you tried to extract just the pure fat from a cashew, which we never try to do, but you would lose all this other benefit, all these other nutrients and the fiber and the protein and carbs from the cashew. And so, same with avocado. Avocado oil is extremely processed versus the whole avocado. So I love my fat, but I just try to get it from the whole food source. Okay, our next recipe, we want to get a couple of them go into the oven, so I want to make sure we get those in. We have, I'm going to come back to the basic cashew cream cheese, because this is the base for the next two recipes, but I want to get those started before we go there. So we're going to make the creamy spinach and artichoke dip. And I'm going to move my plug over here.
Katie, do you want me to rinse out the food processor?
Yes, that would be great. And then we haven't used the blender yet. What do you guys think of the dip? Good? So one thing I was getting at is that I don't use a lot of salt in my cooking. I actually don't use salt in my kitchen at all. So I came, does anyone know True North Health Center? True North Health Center, anyone? Except for Cindy. Has anyone seen What the Health? Okay, that's an excellent movie, and all of the case studies, it's as good as, or maybe even better than Forks Over Knives, if you've seen that, but What the Health, all of the case studies in there came from True North Health. It's a water fasting center, medically supervised water fasting center, and I've been teaching there for 8 years now. So we see disease reversal, totally reversed, cured, again and again on a daily basis. Type 2 diabetes reversed in a couple weeks. I mean, it's incredible. We're teaching a whole food plant-based diet like this, but we're like the tip of the spear. We actually don't use oil, salt, or sugar, refined sugar either. And that makes it more powerful because salt can be inflammatory, in addition to causing hypertension, edema, a lot of other issues that people don't realize because they've never experienced without life without it. But it's, some people are not as sensitive. So that's like this place where we just go when you really want to cure your health. So I cook without it. My recipes are all salt-free. If you want to add salt in, then you can do that. So the cheese that you just had, I would say that's less salty than what they would serve you upstairs, but you can salt it to your liking if you know how to flavor without the salt. Okay.
What fasting? Just drinking water?
Yes.
That was
Yes. Yeah, we should do a whole talk about that. Hey, John, we should do that together.
How long do they eat?
Anywhere from 1 to 40 days. You could actually go a lot longer, but for safety purposes, they do only up to 40 days.
Without starving to death?
Yeah. Well, and you're not doing any exercise. You're really laying in bed most of the time, maybe going to some classes, learning, but you're not using any of your energy to do.
You missed his question, sorry.
Oh, sorry. He was 40 days on water without dying, basically. They check your blood to make sure that you're not burning any protein, because if you start burning protein, that's a sign of starvation. So I just did 14 days in January, and my partner did 32 days last January. And yeah, it's an amazing experience. But so back to our dip. We're gonna chop up this onion, spinach artichoke dip.
Someone has a question right here.
Hey, hi. What about salt replacements?
Oh, great question. Before I go there, let me just show you guys an onion. Here's an onion. Now let me show you how to cut it, because there's lots of different ways to cut onions, and I think this is one that we really want to master because it's always making us cry. So if you have the shoot is on top, the root is on bottom. The root is where more of the dirty side, right? That's our avena. So I'm going to chop the shoot end off, leave that root intact, and then we chop it from top to bottom. So from the shoot end down to the root end. And by leaving this intact, we're preventing some of the compounds from coming out that make us cry. Then you also have access to the outer layers of the onion, and you can just peel that skin back. A lot of times, unless the skin is pretty thick, I'll just peel back the outer layer of the onion because it goes much quicker. And you just toss that. The outer layer of the onion you can put into broth or compost. Well, you can put all of it into compost, but the onion you can put into broth. The skin you don't want to put into broth. Just toss that. Okay, so we have the root intact still. We want to go 95% of the way. Leave that intact. Okay, so I'm going to have the tip of my knife before the root. And we will just then slice around the onion. And then you can hear how dull my knife is by just the slices. So by leaving that root intact, you can actually turn the onion really easily. And that is helpful because we want to have our hand at a 45-degree angle when we're slicing. So I turn it and then I can go the opposite way. And you have these small diced pieces, pretty even in size. And if you wanted them smaller, you could actually slice it one way cross-sectionally too. That's a little more dangerous, so I think it's unnecessary for most people, but it's an option. And this is going to be enough onion. We had a large onion here, so I'm going to add it to our pot here. Now, we were talking about salt alternatives. I just want to grab a little piece of skin out of here. We're going to come right back to that. But right now I want to tell you that I'm putting this onion into a dry pan. How many people are comfortable cooking without oil? You know, doing that at home, yes? So that will save you, cooking without oil can save you 400 calories a day. It could save you 3,500 calories in a week, which is a pound. Every week you could save a pound of weight, excess weight coming onto your body, which is basically what we're doing. That's why we can gain 50 pounds in a year, because every week we're gaining a pound. If you cut out the oil, you're going to see your weight start to come down just by cutting out the oil. Instead of oil, you could use a broth, or you could use just a little bit of water. But my preference is to leave the pan dry because you are going to get more caramelization of the vegetables when it's dry. Okay, and then if you need to, you can add a little bit of oil afterward, or not. You can add a little bit of water or any liquid that is in your dish. And the other key here is to make sure that you're stirring this occasionally so it doesn't stick to the bottom, and to keep the lid on the pan. That keeps all of the moisture in the pan because there's juices from the vegetables, especially onions, celery, mushrooms. They have a lot of water, and that can be your moisture instead of the oil. Okay? And oil may be great flavor in some ways, but it also dulls the flavors. It kind of coats your taste buds so you can't taste everything else. Okay, so don't think you're missing out on flavor by not adding oil. You're actually going to get more flavor. Okay, our garlic here, we're going to do a little bit of garlic. How many people love touching garlic? Really? What?
Smells
Crazy. So I have this little tool I like using to peel the garlic. If you have the garlic still in its skin, you can put it here and then just roll it, and that takes the peel off. But once it's already peeled, what I like to do is put it into a little garlic twist. Instead of a garlic press, the twist allows you to process all of it, because in a garlic press you always get a little bit that doesn't come through, and then you have to take it out and chop it yourself or throw it away. But here, you still have to use a spoon to get it out, although they say there's a way to get it out without any utensils, but at least you get to use it all.
Is that how you build muscle?
Yes. I have my website. If you guys have the you have the recipes. It's the Culinary Gym, and that is totally intentional. And I will not budge on that name because it is so important for us to build our kitchen fitness. That's one piece of it. How many people are kicked out of the kitchen when it comes to Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving Day, anyone kicked out? We don't want you here, you're just in the way.
Or we
No one, you are the ones that are pulling in, right? That's why you're here, because you love cooking.
That's right.
So that's kitchen fitness. This is, we blew a circuit. That is the power of kitchen fitness from that endurance and strength perspective, okay? So it's not just about the knowledge and the skills to do it all. You actually do want the strength. And thank you so much for
Cooking.
Yep, it's back on. If we're not in the kitchen doing things and we start doing more of the meal delivery service, or even getting all of our food shipped to us and we're not walking to the grocery store, walking from our car to the grocery store and through the store, we're just becoming more and more sedentary. So I want to get people into the kitchen again. It doesn't need to be every day, but on a weekly basis at least, we should be cooking, making big meals. Okay, so we have our onions cooking. I added our garlic. We're actually going to do another round of that garlic, because it wasn't very much.
They're on their way, Katie.
We're on their way. Perfect.
Chef Chris is gonna do it.
So, we have the rest of our ingredients. So let's see. We're going to put our cashew cheese, our cultured cashew cheese in the blender. So at the end, after we get these other two things into the oven, I'm going to show you how we make the cultured cashew cheese. But the reason that we're doing the cultured cheese here and not a basic cashew cream cheese is because, and actually I think I named it, it's still called basic cashew cream cheese, but it's the cultured one. You guys have a recipe for it? Yeah. The basic, just cross out basic because it's actually the cultured cashew cream cheese. This is, it's back on. Awesome. So this culturing, it makes our cashews tangy. It adds a sourness to the cheese. And that's what, you don't really think of cheese as sour, but it has a tang to it. And especially like the aged cheese, blue cheese, and goat cheese, it's even more so than just a standard cheddar cheese. This makes a difference when we're doing things that we really want it to have that, or normally it would have a dairy consistency, especially if it would have a sour cream in there. So the culturing is definitely worth it if you're going to do a sour cream or something where you would add that. So the spinach artichoke dip, often we do add sour cream or buttermilk, and both of those would be this would be a great alternative. I'm going to talk to you about how we make this, but I want to show you, I've already used our other container. Do you see all of these air pockets? That's a sign that it's been cultured, that it's fermented, because it's rising and those air pockets are forming. That's a good sign. We want that. Okay, so I'm going to add back to our spinach artichoke dip. 1.5 cups here. I love these measuring cups, but they stopped making them. They're from Sur La Table, and they're little like crepe bowls. They look cute, but they also have a measurement on the top and on the halfway through. So if you buy measuring cups, look and see if you can get ones that have 1.5 cup measurement and 3/4, because it just makes everything so much easier. We're going to put this into our blender, but first, before I add that, I'm going to add our non-dairy milk and stir this guy. Oh, does that smell good? Just imagine this with some mushrooms in it. You could put that over anything and it would taste phenomenal. Our non-dairy milk is in the fridge. Let me grab it. Want me to get it? There's too many fridges back here.
Okay. That's for sure. You should see that bit. Looks like a pantry on steroids. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering about.
So, this is an almond milk. from the marketplace upstairs. And there's a couple different kinds up there, but this one's my favorite because it's only almonds, sprouted almonds, and Himalayan salt. There was another one that had a little more additives, so you want to find, now if you guys are cooks, you know, ideally you want the product, if it's a packaged product, the one that has the least number of ingredients, right? The least number of additives. And the other ones only have those additives to give you a good consistency. But this one is free of that. So we have 3/4 cup of milk. And I put this underneath the cheese just to make sure that we have some liquid there. I'm going to turn off our onions so the cheese doesn't get kind of wrapped around all of the blades and makes it difficult. I'm going to do a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. So this is a magnetic double-sided measuring spoon. The brand is Progressive, and I love these because one side is oval shaped, so it fits into little spice jars. And the magnetic aspect makes it so you can keep them all together without having a ring that holds them together, because that's just a pain. Okay, okay, we'll add our cheesy dip, cultured cashew cheese. Did anyone stalk my website for these recipes for you? I moved to a new website a few months ago, and when I transferred, because my old one was hacked, I'd been on it for 8 years and it just got too many plugins and everything, it got hacked, and when I moved to the new site, not all of the pictures showed up. So I had to go through manually and add them. So when you're looking through the recipes, you may see just a lot of names and not pictures. If you click on them, you should see the pictures on the site. So don't let that stop you, but there's some beautiful pictures of the spinach artichoke dip there. Okay, we have nutritional yeast to add. More nutritional yeast is here. Half a cup of this. Right, this adds the cheesiness. So what are the kind of go-to ingredients when you're trying to make a non-dairy cheese? Cashews, nutritional yeast. Nuts in general, but the cashews are the best because they have that a blander flavor, and the color is they're just a lot nicer for cheese.
Do you want to use raw cashews or roasted?
Raw cashews. You can use roasted and it totally changes the flavor. Same with salted cashews. Salted would be better than roasting though, because you generally put salt into cheese anyways, but the roasting completely changes it. It's not to say you wouldn't want to roast nuts in some dishes for cheesiness, but if we're making something like this, buy raw. It's more nutritious as well. So I usually don't do salt. I would just do a salt-free seasoning, but for this crowd I'm going to do a little bit of salt instead of the salt-free seasoning. But my favorite salt-free seasoning is Benson's Table Tasty.
It's the only place to get that online, Katie.
Yes, Amazon or their website, Benson's Table Tasty. There's a lot of salt-free seasonings out there. You can buy them at the grocery store, like Frontiers, I think the brand at Whole Foods, McCormick. But the Benson's Table Tasty is the best. And they have lots of different flavors too, Italian and Mexican. So those, I want to get them upstairs. Ava is working at it, getting it in the market. I'll pass this around so you guys can take a look at this milk option.
Katie, do you recommend a good source for bulk nutritional yeast? I mean, we're wasting a lot of plastic buying the small ones on
Yes, don't buy
Amazon, and I
those
saw
small
yours.
ones.
That's
This is
bigger.
Frontier. If you,
Okay.
it's not a bad idea to
I
do
know they
that
all
starting
taste
with
different, so
co-op.
I wondered what brand you like, or.
Because it's great to buy large amounts, but you generally have to be buying a large amount of product to get larger bags like this. But it's worth figuring out, like so many plant-based people doing. You could do beans and a lot of things in larger amounts. But there's a brand called Sari, S-A-R-I, and I like that brand because it doesn't have any added nutrients. So we don't want added folic acid or other nutrients. And some people use it as a B12 replacement, and it's just better off doing a B12 supplement. And because you don't want to take loads and loads of nutritional yeast. It should be just a condiment. It's not a plant food. It's not a whole plant food, right? It's a seasoning. So Sari is my favorite brand. And Dr. Furman has one too, but I think Sari is a better price. Sari is a better way to say it. So, we're going to add some black pepper. It's actually very finely ground black pepper. There. And we'll blend all this up. The artichokes. These are so good. So, you guys see our garlic and onion here. Very moist, no oil added, right? The garlic I added after the onion because the garlic can burn really easily. So you want to be careful about not burning the garlic. And I turned it off before it started to burn. If it's just a little bit brown, that's okay, but you don't want it too dark. Okay, there's a couple steps, key steps here. We have the vinegar, the garlic, half of the onion and garlic is going to go into the pot, and we're going to blend this into the blender. We'll make it creamy. And then we're going to add the rest of it. And my lid here. Always want to start with it on low. Oh. Put it back in.
I know how to do the fuse thing, so we're good.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
I can't do it at home, but I can do it here.
This is going to be such a hit. And we have all this extra cheese here. But I'm just going to add a little bit more.
Just want to put the dirty things in here, keep it washed.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
So this dish is one of my favorites. It's so good, I only make it during the holidays. Because I would eat the whole thing. So now we're going to add our, oh, we already added the nutritional yeast. That's okay. We're going to add onion and garlic. Oh, we did.
Artichoke hearts.
Okay, so the artichoke hearts, if they're already diced up, you could add them afterwards. We're removing this from the blender, but to save you a step, we can actually just put them into the blender. Okay, so we have these big artichoke hearts. We're going to do 14 ounces. We're going to say is a cup and a half of these, maybe 2 cups. Stick them right in there. Maybe 2 more of these. They just gave me a large can here. Don't need all of those, guys. This freezes welcome. If you wanted to, you could make a big batch of this and store it in the freezer and then cook it after, a week later. Blend this. We're just going to pulse this. So I want a little bit of chunkiness. And our spinach here, we're going to, it's already chopped up, and spinach, I'm going to do, just loving all this up. We're gonna have a couple more of these guys. For a little more texture. On that one time. And this is the thing, the newer Vitamixes have better pulsing options. So we'll put this in our big bowl here. Do you mind taking this guy? I will. This one. We'll put him together.
Do you want me to take that out too?
Once I pour this in here, I get it too.
Katie, can you talk to us about when you buy organic and when you don't?
Yeah, so if you have seen the Dirty Dozen list, the Clean 15, the Dirty Dozen, the Environmental Protection Agency, I think it is, they have a list of the produce that is the dirtiest and the ones that are the cleanest, and I would go off of that list just to start with. But what I think, some good guidelines to keep in mind, because that is changing all the time, are produce that is going to be easily exposed to pesticides, and that is very common, where produce that's more common, like blueberries, right? There's a lot of money put into making them more efficient to grow, and so that means there's a lot of pesticides and a lot of chemicals to make them grow better. Things like blackberries or loganberries, more unique items, they're not going to have the pesticide numbers approved, so they won't have as many, if that makes sense. So that's one thing to think about. And then the berries, they're above ground and there's not anything covering them, right? You're just eating the berry, so you don't want to have your berries sprayed. Berries are definitely something you'd want to get organic, but unless they're the very unique berries, then it doesn't matter so much. We're going to add our spinach here. The other things like greens, collards, kale, spinach, we definitely want all of those organic because it's exposed to the pesticides. Things that are not exposed, like melon, bananas have the skin on them, that doesn't matter so much. Avocado is actually one that, it's the produce item that is the least important to buy organic because it has the least number of pesticides measured when they do these measurements, right? It shows up at the least. So fresh spinach is great. They were out when I went to the store earlier and somehow they didn't have it here, which they have spinach on the menu, so I'm not sure what happened there, but you can do fresh or frozen. Things to think about with produce that's in the ground, you also want organic. So potatoes, beets, carrots, because that produce is soaking up all of the pesticides that's in the soil, right? If you're not getting organic potatoes, you can just peel them. Same with carrots and beets. And that makes for a sweeter beet or carrot anyways. But those are the couple things that I think about. Tomatoes, I buy organic. Anything that would be GMO, too, definitely organic. You don't want any genetically modified produce or processed foods. And when it comes to processed foods, that's a lot harder to avoid because there's just so much filler that's processed, GMO. And that's why we want to shop the perimeter, shop just in the produce department in the bulk section, and you don't have to worry about that so much. But corn and soy, definitely too, always organic corn or soy. So this dip, I'm going to put a little bit more black pepper in, black pepper, and a little more salt for everyone. Just put this all in here. this can be served with bread, crackers. Bread is how you traditionally serve spinach artichoke dip, but it's so heavy. I mean, so light compared to a dairy version, but it's so rich compared to like a salad, right? But I like to serve it with vegetables, sliced up cucumber or bell pepper. And when I serve it for friends and family, I usually put out both bread and then some vegetables, so they have the option. We're gonna put this into our casserole / baking pan here. Instead of a pie pan, but when you're at home serving this, I would definitely use a pie pan.
Are you using a non-stick pan?
It's not a non-stick pan. It's not going to matter here because we don't need to take it out. People are just going to scrape this clean. So at home with a baking tray, you don't need to put anything below it. It's not like brownies where you're trying to take it out. We're going to just put a little bit of, now I just added more black pepper, but if you're at home, you have a freshly ground black pepper, peppermill, I would do that on top here. And then we're going to add just a little bit of nutritional yeast, and we'll put this into the oven.
What makes that different from just like baker's yeast?
The way that they're processing it is a little bit different. The nutritional yeast is, yeast in general started as a byproduct for alcohol production, and they made nutritional yeast in a similar way, but without using any alcohol. And so it's healthier, but the protein content of nutritional yeast is also a little bit less than baker's yeast, and that can be a good thing or a bad thing, I mean, depending on your perspective. Does anyone know Dr. Breger? Dr. Breger of nutritionfacts.org? Only a few people? You guys gotta write down that website, nutritionfacts.org. You can look up nutritional yeast there, and he's got lots of, a few good videos, but that is my go-to source for learning about nutrition and food. It's one of the first places to go, and he actually gives you the resources to go deeper. Gives you the studies that he's referencing in his videos. We're gonna put this right in here. What did it do? Put it in
That's good.
a baking tray, so this does look good. You could eat this cold,
Yeah.
but it's gonna be so much
I
better.
just did. It was so yummy.
This is my, mine. This is our new Rebel Smart Oven Air. It's like a oven, it does everything an oven can do, except it can also go down to 86 degrees to serve as a dehydrator. And it can go up to like 480 degrees, so it's a great air fryer. An air fryer, we're gonna lose. Air fryer, it is like a convection oven, except it circulates the air at a faster speed, so more air flowing, and that allows for more crispiness.
Want to get time now?
Yes, that would be great. More crispiness because of the airflow and a higher temperature.
And what
We're
would you
gonna
like
do,
it?
where's the, 25 minutes. So that'll give us time. Guys, it's so hot.
It is fun.
This is a brand new venue, so that we're still figuring out how this is gonna work best for chefs, but, you know, my favorite way to do classes is actually hands-on cooking classes. Here, cooking on this level of table works, but if we could get you counter height tables, that would be even better. So I'm trying to get them to do that in another building that we have. So, if you ever talk to Kim, our owner, about it, let her know. Okay, we're gonna make this baked brie. And then I'm gonna show you how to make the cultured cheese. Baked Brie is another one that I only make during the holidays. I've been living alone for a long time, so I often make food and no one else is there to eat it. So that's why I save richer things for the holiday times. But if you guys have family, a lot of friends coming over, these two dishes are great for Friday, Saturday night, even a Sunday meal if you're watching a game or something like that. These will go really quick. So our baked brie is going to go in this little pan here. I'm going to get out our brie in just a second, but first I want to show you our nuts. We have pecans here. So these are going to be sprinkled on top, and I'm just going to dice them up. Cindy, she left us. John, would you mind rinsing this? You're just sneaking away. Just rinse that with a little bit of soap. You don't want to have garlic and onion there. We're going to do pecans here because they're so buttery. So nuts and seeds are all rich in fat. The seeds have more protein than the nuts do. So that means nuts have a higher percentage of fat. I would not consider a nut a good source of protein. Okay, so if you're like wanting more protein in your plant-based diet, don't go to nuts because it's just going to be a lot of fat. You'll gain a lot of calories without a lot of protein. I don't think you need to be worried about being deficient if you're trying to move to a plant-based diet, being deficient in protein because it's in all the plants. So don't worry about that. I just want to let you know if you do, try to get more protein, go for seeds over nuts. Okay. And the nuts and seeds are all different in their flavor, profile. The cashews actually have the most carbohydrates in them. They're the sweetest of the nut. The pecans are more buttery. So they make a great addition. I'm trying to work with the chef. I'm getting a really tasty cauliflower, oil-free buffalo cauliflower. And I said you could do pecans because they add a lot of butteriness instead of the butter that's traditionally with buffalo cauliflowers.
It's on the menu now.
It is. How is it? You tried it?
Yes.
How was it?
Good.
Good?
Good.
Would you order it again?
I probably would as a group. I just had.
Yeah, you want it as an appetizer, not as your full meal. I think that's the healthiest thing on the menu because there's no added oil or salt in it. So we're trying to get more of those options for people. So our pecans, and we'll talk more about that afterwards, because of the food upstairs is just amazing. All of it's amazing. Our pecans are going to go with our jam. This is our delicious wild blueberry reserves. And I love this company. It does have a little bit of sugar added, white sugar. So you can make at home, you can make your own jam to add to this dish. Just put the berries on berries or any fruit really. Put it onto the stovetop, high temperature. Okay, put it onto the stovetop and let that go. The juices will start to boil, and then reduce it to a low heat and let it continue to simmer until you cook it down to the consistency you want. You could add a little bit of ground up chia seeds to thicken it, making it more like a jam. So I'm going to grab our brie. I'll be right back. We have this brie in a little, about 6 inches, maybe 5 inches. Little container that I made the brie in. So our recipe here, because there's a few steps to the brie. It starts with making the cultured cashew cheese, and then you have to make the actual brie. So what you do is blend together the cultured cashew cheese, which I showed you, and then our can of coconut milk solid. So if you buy a can of coconut milk, not coconut beverage, it's very different than the canned coconut milk. Buy the canned coconut milk and put it into the fridge overnight and it will separate the liquid from the solids, and the solids will solidify, and then you can open it up and remove just the solids. Put the solids into the blender with the cashew cheese and a little bit of nutritional yeast, a tablespoon there, and blend it all together. If you want to add a little salt, you can, or you can leave it out. And then put it into the fridge. This was only I was actually in the freezer for an hour and a half. And I'll show you. It's not too solid, but it's solid enough that I could pull it out. So what I had this little container that I put it in, but I put plastic in it first. With just a little bit of plastic wrap. If you wanted to do parchment paper, you could do that too. Or a cheesecloth would be better than plastic wrap. But either way, put it in there. You just kind of push down the sides and pour it from the blender inside, and then put the plastic wrap or the cheesecloth over top, and put this into the fridge for 4 hours. Or if you're in a rush, don't have a lot of time, put it into the freezer. You just don't want to forget about it in the freezer. Okay? So once we have it in here, I'm just going to add a little bit of our jam. And this is not the best. Ooh. This is not the best container, and then I just saw the one that would be a good container. So, yeah, this one, let's put these in. Yeah, thank you. Do you mind mixing this just quick? Thank you so much. So, the reason this isn't the best container is because it's going to melt. Right? It's baked brie. Has anyone made baked brie? Maybe in a croissant. It's my favorite way to have it. When you put it into the oven, it's all going to melt. So the croissant is really nice because it holds it in place. If you put it in, this pan is too wide, and then you're basically just going to have a flat tray of really gooey yumminess with the nuts and jam on it. So we want to have a smaller circular container would be ideal, which is why we're going to use this other one. If you have like a little casserole pan, a little mini dish like this, that would be great. We're going to add our jam and our nuts. If you do baked brie, so I used to do baked brie in college with traditional dairy brie, right? And I would buy the biscuit rolls, like, what's that brand? Pillsbury biscuits. Okay, you separate them, and you have a bunch, like 8 biscuit dough pieces, and you put them all in the middle, so they gather in the middle, and then they're out on the ends. Put the cheese on top of them in the middle, and then fold over the biscuit. That's how you do it. If you want to do this in a biscuit, put that here. Little bowl go. Oh yeah.
So like the Immaculate Conception has the same. Isn't that what's it called? Immaculate. It's not Immaculate Conception. It's Immaculate something.
Is it
And they have the same too. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, it's a
At Whole
vegan.
Foods Market,
Yeah.
I think I bought that
What's
once.
it? Someone know what it's called? Then that's Immaculate.
So, yes, the Whole Foods brand is better. Upstairs they have croissants. So maybe the next time I give this class, I'll try to get one of their vegan croissants upstairs. The dough, because you could do the same thing. Just wrap it around here. Another option instead of dough would be a little bit of like granola, some sort of crumble. If you've done plant-based desserts that have a crumble, that could go on top here too. We're just going to add our jam. Our jam. Yeah. So I thought the utensil wraps that I brought down, I thought it was going to have a spoon in there, and we only had a fork.
We have plastic spoons over here.
This works. So add as much or as little as you like. Doing about, I'd say 2 to 3 tablespoons here. Oh my God, it's gonna be so good. And then sprinkle your pecans right on top. And presentation-wise, you might not want to do too many, but from a flavor standpoint, a little more. So we're just gonna put this into our oven now, and let's see if you don't need to cover it. This piece. So I'm gonna move my couple
14 minutes left.
14. Oh. I was like, 8 o'clock.
No, I don't mean for the class, I meant for what's in the oven, sorry. Need a hanky?
Sure which one it was. I love this little gadget. It's not so little, but it's worth it because it heats up so much faster and cools down faster than your oven. And we can just put this right on top. So for the summertime, if you have to do any baking or roasting or air frying or dehydrating, that's a great option. So that one we're gonna do for 15 to 20 minutes. Anytime that's up with it? Yep. Fantastic. So, our peppers, we're not gonna do our cream-filled peppers. Time-wise, we couldn't fit it in, but you have the recipe for it. Where are those? The second page. These cream-filled roasted peppers, you could use the cultured cashew cheese that I'm gonna show you in a minute, or you could just do the basic cheese recipe as it is. Know that this recipe is an example of how, I'm going to show you how, or tell you how you could do it with the cultured cashew cheese instead of the cashews here. If you're doing the cashews, 3/4 cup of cashews. If you replace that with cheese, the cheese, right, this cheese is denser, so you don't need 3/4 cup. Okay, so maybe 1/2 cup of this cheese, and then add in the other ingredients. So think about that in your, say you at home you have a ranch dressing that you love, or you have a sour cream recipe that you love. If you want to replace the, whatever they're using in the sour cream recipe, cashews or something, another nut, maybe macadamia nut, you could do the cultured cashew cheese instead. And it would just give it more tanginess. These cream-filled roasted mini peppers, what I use are the mini peppers you get from Whole Foods. Has anyone seen those? Or Costco, even Trader Joe's. They're so fantastic. If you want to do an option without the fat, without the nuts, just roast them in the oven. Oh my God, those are the best for you. So tasty. But you can also do hot peppers. Jalapenos, you could do poblano peppers, even serrano if you have some risky people coming. All right. We are going to do our basic cashew cream cheese now. What you do here is with cashews in this recipe, but I want to talk about it with macadamia nuts. Okay? And they didn't have miso in the kitchen. I didn't have time to get to chef. So if I would have got to the chef, I believe they would have found it. But the few people that I talked to didn't know what it was. So it's really cool here. A lot of people here are not already vegan or plant-based, and a lot of you are. But I hear that the number of people of Matthew Kenny's audience, the person that started PlantCity with Kim, they're 90% just standard American people, not vegan or plant-based. 90% of the people have not been eating this way, so we're bringing in, and especially the staff upstairs, the staff, you've noticed there's a lot of just local, a lot of them are college-age kids. I think that's so cool because we're exposing them to this, but it's a big learning curve for them. So what you want to do here is blend the nuts already soaked. These are macadamia nuts that were soaked for a couple hours. Ideally, they'd go a little bit longer. And we're going to add a little bit of water. We're going to start with 1/2 cup. You might add more depending on how long they were soaking for. Because when you soak them,
Katie, how much nuts do you use?
I did 2 cups.
Oh, okay.
2 cups of, is that what this says?
Yeah.
We're on the basic cashew cream cheese.
Oh.
Cross out basic again, remember, this is the cultured cashew cream cheese, but I'm just doing it with macadamia nuts instead of cashews. Okay?
Why is that?
To experiment one, because I love doing new things in the kitchen. Macadamia nuts are the next best nut to cashews when you're making cheese, because for the same reasons. It's a bland flavor. I amazing flavor, but like, it's not, just like with sweeteners, if you're gonna use dates as a sweetener, it's a neutral flavor, where banana is gonna give you a very strong banana flavor. Works the same way with nuts. You don't wanna add walnuts to make a cultured cashew cheese, right? It's a very different flavor. The macadamia is also that white color, but they're more expensive, so that's why we go to cashews most of the time. So this is a treat to have macadamias. Now I did a little bit of water. I'm gonna do a little bit of salt. A couple options for adding a probiotic. You could do the miso, like I said. Who knows what miso is? Fermented soybeans. They're so fantastic. Adds a lot of umami to your dishes, so a lot of that savoriness. If you don't want to use miso, I like miso because it lasts in the fridge for a long time. Where another option is Rejuvelac. Rejuvelac is a liquid. It's a beverage that I don't recommend drinking necessarily, but you can use it to add probiotics, add good bacteria to something like this where you want to grow that bacteria and culture the cheese. Rejuvelac, once it's opened, it'll only last a couple days in the fridge, so that's why I use the miso.
Can you know when you drain off your garbanzo beans?
Yes.
Could you use that?
I don't think so because I don't know that that has any bacteria, because you want this healthy bacteria to cultivate. You want to grow that bacteria. But that is great. That's called aquafaba, the liquid from the beans, and that's fantastic for other things like dressings, because it adds even baked goods. It adds a gelatinous consistency. The third option, though, would be, or you have two more options. One would be a yogurt, a plant-based yogurt, coconut or soy yogurt. Just a couple tablespoons of that could go into here. Or, actually, would you mind going to grab a yogurt off the shelf up there? Any?
Plain.
Just plain? Yeah. But coconut or cashew, any base will work. Or the fourth option is a probiotic supplement. So that's another option that's easy to keep around without it going bad. And then we'll add this all to the blender when she brings down that yogurt. We'll mix it up. And then what you do is pour it into a container, like a glass container. I like round ones more than this rectangular shape, but it needs to be glass. And it needs to be clean because we're growing this healthy bacteria. We don't want any bad bacteria in there. So it's very important to make sure that it's glass and it's cleaned ahead of time. Even if it's clean, you know, I grab a clean one out of the cabinet, I still wash it again to make sure. Now, the person I learned this from is actually, the website is at the top of the page, Miyoko Shinner. She's a fantastic chef in California. She makes these cheeses and sells them at Whole Foods Market and actually ships them around the country, maybe even the world. So they're fantastic, and this is where I think a lot of the plant-based world has learned about culturing cheese. And where was I going with that? Oh, she knows about the benefits of going low salt or avoiding salt, but with cheeses like this, without the salt, you risk developing more of that bad bacteria. So it's just a safety reason that we want to add a little bit of salt. If you're adding miso, which has high salt, then you don't need to add any extra salt. But if you're not adding miso or an ingredient that might have salt in it, then just add a little bit like we've already done. Okay. So this is kite filled with, I'm guessing, almond. Yeah, almond milk, Greek style yogurt. So we're just going to add a tablespoon and a half. You know, I just have to make a list of what I take.
Can you load my car with some stuff on there? Oh my God.
I can't wait to try more of that. So just gonna blend this up. You got a lid here somewhere? So, Cindy, do you mind doing me a favor too? Yep. We're gonna double this up, and then we gotta wash one of them so we can actually put our macadamia in there. And how's our time on this?
We got a little over 4 minutes.
Okay, so I'm gonna chop up some vegetables to go in those with our dips in a minute. I wanted to show you, this is definitely not ready, but this is key 2 reasons you want to stop. Don't overdo the blender, because this could go for a couple minutes before it's ready, and you can burn out your blender. I've done it before, and it's super disappointing. Sometimes it will come back on, and other times it won't. The other thing is, you can just see here that it's a little bit gritty. You can't see too much, but I could get more on here. There's a grittiness to it. It's not completely cream. You want to let it blend until it's creamy and silky. Okay? Sometimes it's harder if you have an older blender and the blade is just dull. It might be harder to get that consistency. But that's the benefit of soaking the nuts as long as possible. I don't like going overnight because they get to that funny color, but if you could go 4 hours, that would be awesome. So let's turn this back on. And using a tamper to stir them. See, just
No, you shouldn't have.
I shut it off. Another thing, when you're making these, the benefit of macadamia is that it's super fluffy. So if you ever want to do a ricotta cheese, macadamia is a better nut to use than cashew. Okay? Because look at this. This is almost so great. You don't want to overblend it. Now I remember actually. I went to Plant Lab, which is a plant-based culinary school that Matthew Penny started, and it sadly closed. But I made the lasagna upstairs. If you have that lasagna, go order it. You can get it tonight. The next time you're here, they use the macadamia cheese, ricotta cheese in it, and you can just see, you see the fluffiness? If you overblend it, it's gonna get too creamy and it kind of loses the benefit of using macadamia. Oh no. I'll show you.
I use it on the meatballs too. I don't remember there's some macadamia cheese upstairs.
And if you do blend it till it's creamier, it's still going to be a different, fluffier cream than if you were to use cashews. So I want to go a little bit more, maybe, so you don't have a grittiness, but you don't want to overdo it. Just come back. I can get to you. Okay. Oh, that cheese in there. That's so good. So I'm gonna blend this one more time just to make sure we don't have any large pieces of macadamia in there. Now, we just went over some basics with the cheeses. You can really do so much with these by adding the different herbs and spices. Like in the cream-filled roasted peppers, right? I added cinnamon and cayenne and cumin, so a lot of seasonings totally changes the flavor. Cindy gets back, we'll have her pour this into the clean glass container. And I'm going to chop up some bacon. So we're going to do what's right here for you. You could scoop that in there. Do you have? Okay, perfect. Do this guy. The timer is up for the spinach one or the spinach one? Okay, perfect. Anyone want yogurt? So, I'm not rushing to get the spinach dip because on my recipe it says if you want to go 15 minutes longer, you can if you'd like a little more crispy toastiness. So let me take a look. Oh. Our pecan, this dish is actually going to come out early because our nuts are done. Okay, so what we're going to do, to depending on your oven that you're using, how close it is to the top, the temperature and everything. You really should have more gloves down here. So be careful.
I'm putting this in this dish.
Yes.
Okay, I went to wash it out and said, oh, it's full. That's not done yet, that's 13 minutes, but
Yeah, if you missed me just saying, because it's brie, it's one that doesn't need to be cooked at all. But all it needed to do was kind of melt with everything else here. And our pecans are just starting to brown on top, so we don't want to overdo them. Okay. And this, if you could just put it onto the top one, so we brown it a little bit more on top. I'm going to turn this up to. So here, the air fryer oven here has a little knob that turns the temperature, one that turns the time, and another one that actually turns the mode. It goes, like I was saying, hydrating, roasting, baking, all of that. Okay. So I'm going to chop up some veggies. We're going to do some apple, cucumber, bell pepper, and then you have options to go with along with the crackers. Does anyone have any questions? Anything?
You don't need like any salt?
Is the question, do I not eat any salt?
Yeah.
That is absolutely not true. But I don't have any salt in my kitchen. So salt is a stimulant for eating. When we salt our food, we just want more of it. And being a food addict, that's pretty dangerous for me. Just being here for a week and eating many meals upstairs, I've gained weight. Because I'm traveling, I'm not eating at home, so it's easy to eat here. We got to an Airbnb where I have a kitchen, a home, so I'm gonna start making my food again and then just being here on occasion to eat like most other people. You know, it's not an issue when you just do it occasionally. But even at home, if I'm cooking all the time and salting my food, it's really easy to overdo it. Because plants are super nutritious, but that doesn't mean nuts are low in calories, right? So if we add too much sweetener, even if it's from fruit, if we add too much fat, even if it's from whole food fats, and if we add too much salt, it just leads to the pleasure trap, basically. Has anyone read the book, The Pleasure Trap? Heard about it? It's fabulous by Dr. Goldhammer. And
Susan Pierce Thompson.
no, but she's fabulous too. Dr. Goldhammer and Doug Lyle, The Pleasure Trap. Another book that is written by Susan Pierce Thompson is called Bright Line Eating.
Oh, yeah.
And I wrote her first e-book, the e-cookbook for Bright Line Eating was my cookbook. All my recipes gone. So I'm not going to worry about it.
So you just want this in this dish, correct?
Yes, and then we're going to cover it. If there's a lid, one of those lids right there. Yep. Might be that one with the hole in it, but what I was going to go back to, if you want to just look up YouTube, The Pleasure Trap, there's a presentation, so you don't have to read the book. And there is the audio book for The Pleasure Trap as well. But it talks about the sugar, oil, and salt. And no one needs to be 100%. You know, we're not asking people to be SOS free. I'm not. But I choose to not have it in my home because then I don't overdo it in the home. It keeps my taste buds sensitive where I'll notice the salt in whole foods. I'll notice the sweetness in fruit and vegetables, the bell pepper, the sweet potato, and I'll enjoy my food a lot more without going to more of the processed items. And then when I go out, it's not a big deal. Because there's so much salt in our food outside the home that if you're salting your food inside the home and eating out, you're going to overdo it, have more sodium than you need. And as a young person, hypertension, you know, usually isn't something that you need to worry about. If you're healthy enough, your blood vessels can adapt. But other issues like edema and inflammation can be triggered by salt. And I notice even when I eat out, even though I'm eating at home without the salt, when I eat out, I get more pain in my joints. Me, specifically in my hands, my partner notices it in his feet and his knees. So everyone's a little bit different, but it's just something to think about when you're at home. You can flavor your food with all of the herbs and spices, vinegar. Talk about, salt alternatives, right? that free gift at the bottom of your recipes, it says if you, a free gift if you sign up for my, sign up there, you'll get onto my newsletter. But that free gift is a little booklet that includes alternatives to using salt, sugar, and oil. It's a really great handout. And you can print it out. And, oh, you know what? I actually have an example of that little booklet. I printed it out and laminated it so that I can access it easily.
Katie, how about iodine?
Iodine is a great nutrients that we're not getting enough of. Our soil's depleted of iodine. And so Dr. Clapper was my personal doctor. He's no longer working, but thank you. Dr. Clapper and Dr. Greger are two of my favorite plant-based doctors, and they're actually recommending possibly supplementing with iodine because it's something that we get from root vegetables and sea vegetables, but most people aren't eating sea vegetables, and their root vegetables don't have very much iodine anymore because our soils don't have iodine. Iodine is very important for the thyroid specifically, but it's also in your muscle tissues, and iodine is in competition with chloride and fluoride, which we're getting in our water supply. So any iodine that you are getting, why am I cutting these like this? This is my favorite way to cut a bell pepper. If anyone noticed, I'll show you these little pieces, and I just turn it in circulars because if you do long julienne pieces, they're too big for your mouth. But for dipping, you really do want the larger ones. So I just cut some of these larger triangle like pieces. So don't supplement with anything unless you get tested though. B12, of course, is a good one, and vitamin D, a lot of people could do supplementation there without worry, but iodine, I wouldn't spend money on supplementing unless you first just spend a little bit of money on getting tested to see. Oh, this is beautiful. What's the best way for us to eat all this food? Doesn't that look good? Now, imagine this in a pie pan with all these veggies and crackers and bread around it, how fast it's going to go. Even if you have company over, you might want to actually make 2 of these. So I'm just going to...
This down first.
Yes, they do. Would you say on purpose? Oh,